I held the certified check in my trembling hands, staring at the numbers until they blurred. $25 million. My best friend Helen had left me $25 million, and she had been dead for exactly 3 weeks. I grabbed my purse, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might give out right there in the attorney's office. After 50 years of marriage, after decades of making do with whatever my husband decided I could have, we were finally free. No more worrying about medical bills. No more asking permission to buy groceries. I drove home as fast as my old Buick would take me, rehearsing how I'd tell him. Robert would be so happy. Maybe this would fix everything that had felt broken between us for so long. When I pulled into our driveway in Cedar Falls, I noticed an unfamiliar silver Mercedes parked on the street. I walked through the front door, calling out his name. The house was quiet, but I could hear voices coming from his study. I moved closer, about to knock, when I heard Robert's voice, low and irritated. "I'm telling you, Patricia, we have to move faster. She's 72. How much longer can we wait?" A woman's voice, young and sharp, answered him. "Darling, I know you're anxious, but we discussed this. If you push for the guardianship now, the kids might get suspicious. We need them on our side." I froze in the hallway, my hand still clutching the check. "The kids are fine," Robert said. "Daniel's already convinced his mother's losing it. All those stories I've been feeding him about her forgetting things, getting confused. And Jessica, well, she'll do whatever her brother says if it means protecting the family money." Patricia laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You're terrible, but brilliant. Once you get guardianship and we move her into that facility upstate, we'll have complete control. The house, the retirement accounts, everything." My legs went weak. The check in my hand suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I backed away from the door, moving as quietly as I could, and left through the front door I'd entered just moments before. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, unable to process what I'd just heard. Then I drove. I didn't know where I was going until I found myself at Riverside Park, the place where Helen and I had met every Thursday for 40 years to feed the ducks and talk about everything under the sun. Let me start from the beginning, because you need to understand how I got here. My name is Margaret O'Brien, and I was 72 years old when I discovered my husband was planning to erase me from my own life. I had married Robert when I was 22, fresh out of library science school with dreams of running my own library someday and maybe writing children's books. He was charming, established, and 15 years older. He promised to take care of me, and back then, I thought that sounded romantic. I worked at the Cedar Falls Public Library for 40 years, eventually becoming head librarian. I loved that job. I loved helping children discover their first favorite books, helping students with research, creating reading programs for seniors. But Robert always made it clear that my salary was pin money, that his income as a medical equipment sales director was what really mattered. He managed all our finances. He said it was too complicated for me to understand, that I should focus on my books and let him handle the real world. After 40 years of hearing it, I had started to believe him. We raised 2 children. Daniel, now 48 and a corporate attorney in Chicago. Jessica, 45, a real estate agent in Denver. Both of them were successful, both of them rarely called, and both of them had somehow absorbed their father's view that I was sweet but simple, loving but incompetent. Helen had seen it all. Helen Morrison, my best friend since we were 17 years old. She had never married, had built a fortune through a series of smart business ventures, including a chain of vintage bookstores across the Midwest that she'd sold for a fortune 10 years ago. She was sharp as a tack until the day she died, and she had watched my marriage with increasing concern over the decades. "Margaret," she had said to me just a month before the stroke that killed her, "promise me something. Promise me that when I'm gone, you'll finally stand up for yourself." I had laughed nervously, not understanding what she meant. We were sitting in this very park, watching the ducks. "Helen, what are you talking about? I'm fine." She had gripped my hand with surprising strength. "Are you, though? When was the last time you bought yourself something without asking Robert first? When was the last time you made a decision about your own life?" I hadn't had an answer. Now, sitting in my car in that same parking lot, I finally understood what Helen had been trying to tell me. I pulled out the envelope that had come with the check. I had been so excited in the attorney's office that I'd barely skimmed the letter. Now I read it carefully. The letter was in Helen's handwriting, dated 3 months before her death. "My dearest Margaret," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're holding a check that represents every dollar I managed to save and invest over my lifetime. I'm leaving it all to you, and I'm going to tell you why. For 50 years, I've watched you shrink. I've watched that brilliant, vibrant girl I knew in high school disappear into the shadow of a man who convinced you that you were less than you are. Robert is a manipulator, Margaret. He's isolated you, controlled you, and made you doubt yourself. I've seen it happening, and I've tried to warn you gently over the years, but you weren't ready to hear it. This money is yours alone. I have instructed my attorney, David Chen, that it is to be deposited into an account solely in your name. No joint accounts. No spousal access. Robert cannot touch it. I've also arranged for David to recommend other professionals you'll need: a divorce attorney, a private investigator, and a financial advisor. You're going to think I'm being dramatic. You're going to think Robert loves you in his way. But Margaret, love doesn't control. Love doesn't diminish. Love doesn't make you feel small. I won't be there to help you through what comes next, but I've given you the tools. Please, please use them. It's not too late to have the life you were meant to have. All my love, your sister in every way that matters, Helen." I sat in the car and cried for an hour. Then I dried my eyes, started the engine, and drove to a bank 3 towns over, where no one knew me and Robert had no connections. I opened an account in my name only and deposited the check. The young woman who helped me looked at the amount and tried not to react, but I saw her eyes widen. "Is everything all right, ma'am?" she asked carefully. "It will be," I said. Then I went home. Robert was in the living room, reading the newspaper. The silver Mercedes was gone. He looked up when I walked in, his expression mildly curious. "Where have you been? I thought you had that attorney appointment this morning." I could have confronted him right there, but Helen's letter had been clear. I needed help. I needed a plan. So I lied for the first time in 50 years of marriage. I did. It was just some paperwork about Helen's estate. Nothing important. I kept my voice steady, even though my heart was racing. She left me her book collection. I'll need to figure out where to put it all. "That's nice," Robert said, not even looking up from his paper. "Maybe we can donate most of it. We don't have room for more clutter." He had no idea I was holding the key to my freedom. He had no idea Helen had been smarter than him. That night, I lay awake next to my husband of 50 years. This man who was planning to have me declared incompetent and locked away. I thought about all the small signs I had missed. The way he had started telling people I was getting forgetful over the past year. The way he'd convinced me to give him power of attorney just in case. The way my prescription medications had changed 3 months ago, and how I'd been feeling increasingly foggy and confused ever since. Looking at those pill bottles now with new eyes, I realized what he'd been doing. He'd been setting the stage, making everyone around us believe I was declining, preparing the narrative that would justify taking control of my life. The next morning, I told Robert I wanted to visit Jessica in Denver for a week. "I'd like to spend some time with my daughter," I said. "Maybe help her with that new house she bought." He agreed immediately, probably relieved to have me out of the way. "That's a great idea, Maggie. You could use a change of scenery." Instead of flying to Denver, I drove to Madison, Wisconsin, and met with David Chen, the attorney Helen had recommended. He was in his 50s, kind-eyed, and when I showed him Helen's letter, he nodded slowly. "Helen talked about you often," he said. "She was very worried. She asked me to help you in any way I could." I told him everything I had overheard, everything about the past 50 years. By the end of our 4-hour meeting, we had assembled a team. The private investigator was a woman named Maria Santos, a former police detective in her 60s who specialized in elder abuse cases. "I'm going to be honest with you, Margaret," she said in our first meeting. "What you're describing is textbook financial and emotional abuse. The drugging, if we can prove it, is a felony. We're going to build an airtight case, but you need to be prepared. This is going to get ugly." "He was going to put me in a facility," I said quietly. "He was going to make everyone believe I was incompetent and lock me away like a problem to be solved. How much uglier can it get?" Maria smiled grimly. You'd be surprised. But we're going to make sure he's the one who ends up locked away, not you. The plan was meticulous. First, Maria would document everything. Robert's affair with Patricia, his financial machinations, his plans for guardianship. Meanwhile, I would return home and play the role of the devoted, slightly confused wife. I would carefully save my new medications instead of taking them and get tested to see what he'd been giving me. I would record conversations when I could. I would gather 50 years' worth of financial documents that I'd never been allowed to see. David Chen explained that Robert had been very clever. He's been systematically isolating you and undermining your credibility. If you had tried to fight him 6 months ago, before you had resources, before you had proof, he might have succeeded in having you declared incompetent. But now, with Helen's gift and our help, we can turn this around. Dr. Sarah Rodriguez, the physician David recommended, ran tests on the medications I brought her. The results made me physically ill. Robert had been replacing my thyroid medication with a combination of anti-anxiety medication and mild sedatives that mimicked symptoms of dementia. Confusion, memory problems, difficulty concentrating. This is criminal, Dr. Rodriguez said, her face flushed with anger. He's been chemically inducing cognitive impairment. Combined with the gaslighting, this is elder abuse of the worst kind. We need to document everything. I returned home after a week and fell back into my routine. Robert noticed nothing different about me, because he had never really looked at me to begin with. I was furniture in his life, a problem to be managed, not a person to be seen. But now I was watching him. I saw the way he pocketed my medication bottles and replaced them with his doctored versions. I saw the way he took phone calls in his study and closed the door. I saw the silver Mercedes appear 3 times that week, and Maria's cameras caught Patricia entering through the back door while I was supposedly at my book club. Maria's investigation uncovered layers of betrayal I hadn't imagined. Patricia wasn't just Robert's mistress. She was a consultant he'd hired 2 years ago through his company, supposedly to help with sales strategies. He'd been funneling company money to her through fraudulent consulting contracts. They'd been planning this for years. But the worst discovery came when Maria accessed Robert's email through methods I decided I didn't want to know about. We found his communications with an elder law attorney, drafted documents for guardianship, brochures for memory care facilities that cost $15,000 a month, and we found emails to our children. Daniel had written back, "Dad, are you sure Mom's that bad? She seemed fine at Christmas." Robert's response, "Son, I know this is hard to see. Your mother has always been good at putting on a show when she needs to. But I'm with her every day. The confusion, the memory lapses, the poor decisions, they're getting worse. I found her trying to donate money to a phone scam last week. We need to act before she hurts herself or loses everything we've worked for." Every word was a lie. I had never been confused. I had never fallen for a scam. He was creating a fictional version of me to justify erasing the real one. Jessica's emails were shorter, more hesitant, but ultimately she deferred to her brother and father. "If you both think it's necessary, I trust your judgment. Just make sure Mom's comfortable wherever she goes." They were going to put me away. My own children were going to help their father put me in a facility and take control of my life, and they believed they were doing it out of love. I wanted to call them, to scream that I was fine, that their father was lying, but David advised against it. "We need the element of surprise," he said. "If they know you're onto them, Robert will accelerate his plans. We need more time." That time came over the next 6 months. Maria documented everything: the affair, the fraudulent consulting contracts, the drugging, the guardianship plans. David built our legal case, preparing for both criminal charges and divorce proceedings. Dr. Rodriguez monitored my health as I stopped taking Robert's poison medications, and my mind cleared. And I played my part. I pretended to be forgetful when Robert was watching. I asked him to help me with simple tasks. I let him think his plan was working perfectly. The hardest part was the loneliness. I couldn't tell anyone what was happening. My book club friends noticed I seemed distracted. My library colleagues at the volunteer reading program wondered why I'd become so quiet. But I couldn't risk word getting back to Robert. Only Helen would have understood. And Helen was gone. Sometimes I would sit in the park where we used to meet and talk to her in my mind, telling her about every development, imagining her fierce pride in what I was doing. The perfect moment came when Robert announced he was having a 75th birthday party. "Something big," he said. "I want to celebrate this milestone with everyone who matters." He invited 150 people, colleagues from his company, neighbors, his golf buddies, our children and their families, everyone who had known us over the past 50 years. He rented out the ballroom at the Cedar Falls Country Club. He was planning to give a speech about our 50 years together, about his devoted wife who had stood by him through everything. It was going to be his victory lap, proof that he was a respectable man with a perfect life. He had no idea it would be his last day of freedom. I got dressed that evening in a navy dress I had bought with my own money from my secret account. For the first time in 50 years, I hadn't asked Robert's permission to buy something. I felt powerful in a way I never had before. Robert complimented me as we drove to the club. "You look lovely, Maggie. I'm glad you're having one of your good days." One of my good days. As if my mind came and went like the weather, I smiled and said nothing. The ballroom was beautiful. Crystal chandeliers, fresh flowers on every table, a string quartet playing softly. Our grandchildren were running around in their party clothes. Daniel and Jessica greeted me with careful hugs, the kind you give someone fragile, someone who might break. At 7 o'clock, Robert took the microphone. The room quieted. "50 years ago," he began, "I married the sweetest woman in the world. Margaret has been my anchor, my heart, my everything. I watched from my seat. This man who had drugged me, betrayed me, planned to erase me from my own life. This man who was about to tell 150 people how much he loved me." The doors at the back of the ballroom opened. 2 police officers walked in, followed by David Chen, Maria Santos, and a woman in a dark suit I recognized as the district attorney. Robert's smile froze. The room fell silent except for the confused whispers that started to ripple through the crowd. "Robert Joseph O'Brien," one of the officers said, walking toward the stage. "You're under arrest for elder abuse, fraud, and assault through the administration of controlled substances." The room erupted. Gasps, cries of shock, my grandchildren starting to cry. Daniel jumped up from his seat, shouting that there had been some mistake. Jessica grabbed my arm, asking me what was happening. But I stood up calmly and walked toward the stage. Robert was being handcuffed, his face twisted in disbelief and rage. When he saw me approaching, understanding dawned. "You," he said. "You did this. You're not confused at all." I stopped a few feet away from him. "No, Robert, I'm not confused. I've never been confused. But you've been very busy trying to make everyone think I was." The district attorney stepped forward. "Mrs. O'Brien has provided us with substantial evidence of systematic elder abuse. We have medical records showing you've been administering unauthorized medications to your wife. We have financial records showing fraud. We have documented plans to illegally obtain guardianship. We have testimony and recordings that will be presented in court." David appeared at my side, handing me a folder. I opened it and pulled out the photographs Maria had taken, the email printouts, the medical reports. "You've been poisoning me," I said, my voice steady and clear, loud enough for everyone to hear, replacing my thyroid medication with sedatives to make me seem incompetent. "You've been telling everyone I have dementia when my mind is perfectly sound. You were planning to have me declared incompetent, put me in a facility, and take control of everything I own." "That's insane," Robert sputtered. "She is confused. She doesn't know what she's saying." "The medical evidence says otherwise, Doctor," Rodriguez said, stepping forward from the crowd. She'd been seated at one of the tables, waiting. "I've been monitoring Mrs. O'Brien's health for 6 months. She has no cognitive impairment whatsoever. What she had was chronic drugging by her husband." Daniel pushed through the crowd. "Dad, what is she talking about? What medications?" I turned to my son, this man who had been so ready to believe his mother was failing. "Your father has been gaslighting me for years, but especially these past 12 months. He's been telling you I'm confused, forgetful, incompetent. He's been creating a narrative to justify taking control of my life. And you believed him without ever talking to me directly, without asking me how I was feeling, without questioning why I would suddenly decline so dramatically." Daniel's face went pale. "Mom, He said you wouldn't admit it. He said you didn't realize. Did you ever ask me? I said quietly. Did you ever spend time alone with me and ask me, directly, if I was struggling? The silence was my answer. Jessica was crying now. Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I thought we were helping you. You thought you were protecting the family money, I said, and my voice was harder than I'd ever heard it. Your father showed you the guardianship papers, didn't he? He told you it would protect the estate. And you agreed because you didn't want to lose your inheritance. Robert was being led away, still protesting, but I wasn't done. I turned to address the room, all these people who had known me for decades. I want you all to know something, I said. I am 72 years old. I do not have dementia. I do not have cognitive impairment. What I have is a husband who saw me as property rather than a person, who decided I was inconvenient, and who tried to chemically erase my mind so he could control my life. My best friend Helen saw what was happening and left me the resources to fight back. She gave me $25 million in the name of an attorney who could help me. That money is mine alone. Robert cannot touch it, and neither can anyone else who is willing to see me locked away. I looked at Daniel and Jessica. You're both written into my will, but I'm having it revised. Until you understand what you were willing to do, until you understand that you valued money over your mother's freedom, you won't see a cent. I'm leaving everything to the Helen Morrison Foundation for Elder Abuse Prevention, which I'm founding next month. Daniel started to protest, but I held up my hand. I'm done. I'm done being the sweet, simple Maggie who everyone can manage and control. I'm done asking permission to exist. I'm done shrinking myself to make other people comfortable. The police led Robert out. The district attorney followed, along with David and Maria. The party dissolved into chaos, people whispering and staring, my children trying to talk to me while I simply walked away. I drove myself home that night for the first time in 50 years, Robert having always insisted on driving because he said I was too nervous on the highway. I wasn't nervous at all. The divorce took 8 months. Robert's attorneys tried everything, but the evidence was overwhelming. The drugging, the affair with Patricia, the fraud through his company, the attempted illegal guardianship. The court found that he had systematically abused me for years and had planned to essentially imprison me to access whatever money I might have. I was awarded the house, 70% of the retirement accounts, and full control of all marital assets. Robert's remaining assets were seized to pay legal penalties and restitution. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison for elder abuse, fraud, and assault. Patricia disappeared somewhere along the way. I heard she moved to Arizona and found another wealthy older man to attach herself to. I didn't waste energy thinking about her. Instead, I focused on building the life I should have had all along. The Helen Morrison Foundation opened 9 months ago. We provide legal assistance, private investigators, medical advocacy, and safe housing for elderly people trapped in abusive situations. We help them document abuse, escape safely, and rebuild their lives. So far, we've helped 87 people, most of them women over 65, but also a handful of elderly men whose adult children or spouses were exploiting them. Every time someone walks into our offices, confused and scared and convinced they're too old to fight back, I tell them my story. I tell them about being 72 years old and discovering my husband was planning to erase me. I tell them about finding the courage to fight. I tell them it's not too late. I also went back to writing. I published a children's book last year about a brave duck who learns to fly again after being told she was too old. It's dedicated to Helen. I'm working on a second one now. Daniel came to see me 6 weeks ago. He had been to therapy, he said. He was starting to understand the ways he'd absorbed his father's attitudes about women, about me, about who deserved power and voice in a family. He asked if I would consider forgiving him someday. Someday, I told him, but forgiveness isn't something you're owed. It's something that might grow if you do the work to become someone worthy of it. He's doing the work. We talk on the phone now, once a week. It's a start. Jessica took longer. She's still processing the fact that she was willing to let her father institutionalize me. But she came to volunteer at the foundation last month, and I saw her sitting with a 70-year-old woman whose son was trying to take her house. Jessica was crying as she listened. Maybe that's her start. As for me, I'm 73 now, and I'm living a life I couldn't have imagined 2 years ago. I wake up every morning in my house, the house I fought for and won, and I decide how to spend my day. I have coffee with new friends I've made through the foundation. I write in the afternoons. I travel when I want to, places I was never allowed to go before because Robert said they were too expensive or too far or too impractical. Last month, I went to Paris. Helen and I had always planned to go together. I scattered some of her ashes by the Seine and thanked her for giving me my life back. Sometimes people ask me if I'm angry about the 50 years I lost. The truth is, I'm not. Anger is exhausting, and I don't have time for it. What I feel is free. What I feel is powerful. What I feel is like myself for the first time since I was 22 years old. If you're listening to this and you see yourself in my story, I want you to know something. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how long you've been stuck. It doesn't matter if everyone around you has convinced you that you're the problem. You deserve better. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be heard. You deserve to live your own life on your own terms. I was 72 years old when I finally fought back, and these past 2 years have been the best of my entire life. The sun is shining, and I intend to enjoy every single ray.